The ignorant always regard anger as equivalent to energy. Wow. Let's really think about that for a second. You know how often we see someone just exploding in rage? They're raising their voice, trying to completely dominate a room, and we somehow mistakenly associate that outward aggression with actual power. It's an incredibly common, yet honestly highly dangerous misconception. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to take that idea and completely flip it on its head. We'll be looking at one of the most profound dialogues from ancient literature, which proves that what we often think of as strength is actually our absolute greatest vulnerability. We'll be exploring the great flip, the mechanics of anger, and the strategy of forgiveness. We're looking at a brilliant excerpt from the ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata. Specifically, this is a highly tense, deeply philosophical conversation between King Yudhishthira and Draupadi. And what's truly fascinating about this source text is how it takes our modern and, let's face it, sometimes superficial understanding of emotional intelligence and gives it this massive cosmic weight. Over the course of this explainer, we're going to break down the exact mechanics of why anger completely fails us and why these ancient texts argue that forgiveness is literally the ultimate strategic advantage. So let's jump right into Section 1, the dilemma of anger.
The text tells us, anger is the root of both prosperity and adversity. Yudhishthira establishes this core, totally unshakable truth right out of the gate. The crucial point here is that anger itself acts as a massive pivot point for the entire trajectory of our lives. The text makes it incredibly clear. The person who successfully suppresses their anger, they earn prosperity. But the person who just constantly gives way to fierce anger, they're absolutely guaranteed to reap adversity. It's not just a bad mood. The text actually views anger as the active slayer of men, the literal root cause of destruction for every creature in the world.
So, how exactly does all this internal destruction happen? Let's break it down in Section 2, the anatomy of wrath. Just look at this cascading list of consequences. It really shows how anger completely blinds a person to basic logic and morality. What happens to human judgment when wrath totally takes over? Well, the source text tells us the angry man commits sin. He might even go so far as to kill his own preceptors, his teachers, and hurl insults at his superiors. Crucially, the angry person completely loses the ability to distinguish between what should be said and what shouldn't. In this totally blind state, they might slay someone who doesn't deserve it, or, bafflingly, end up worshiping someone who actually deserves to be punished. Ultimately, anger literally destroys the self by sending the soul straight to the regions of Yama, the god of death. And this brilliantly illustrates the duality of wrath. We tend to think that someone lashing out is displaying an outward show of force, right? But in reality, it's just revealing their inner weakness and blindness. The text argues that true force of character belongs only to the person of deep insight who, through their wisdom, can actually suppress their rising wrath. When you're overwhelmed by anger, you just can't acquire generosity, dignity, courage, or skill. The angry person cannot see things in their true light. And because of that, they are entirely incapable of exhibiting true energy when it actually matters. This brings us to a stark, highly practical reality, especially for those who might find themselves at a disadvantage. The text notes, a weak man unleashing wrath on the mighty deliberately throws away his own life. It points out that if a weak person, persecuted by others, foolishly becomes angry at men who are way mightier than they are, they just become the root cause of their own destruction. For the weak, uncontrolled anger against the powerful isn't some brave stand for justice. No, the text views it as a literal act of self-destruction that earns them absolutely nothing in this world or the regions hereafter. But Yudhishthira doesn't stop there. He scales this personal blindness up to a massive societal level. Just imagine this terrifying scenario. What if the injured always return their injuries? What if the chastised person always chastised their superior right back? If fathers slay sons and husbands slay wives, what happens to the world? The text warns that an endless cycle of angry retaliation would cause the absolute destruction of every living creature. The very continuation of our species, the birth of creatures itself, relies entirely on peace. If everyone just gave way to wrath, society would literally collapse overnight. So if anger is the ultimate weakness and the fast track to ruin, the source text pivots here to reveal what true enduring strength actually looks like. Let's move to Section 3, the power of forgiveness. We completely redefine forgiveness here, drawing on the deeply revered verses of the illustrious Kashyapa. You see, forgiveness is not framed as a passive weakness or some kind of concession. It is defined explicitly as the might of the mighty, the virtue by which the universe is held together. The text just flips the script entirely. Conquering your wrath and showing forgiveness, even when you're insulted, oppressed, or angered by a strong person. Well, that isn't surrender. It is the ultimate display of cosmic stabilization.
Kashyapa elevates forgiveness to the absolute highest spiritual plane imaginable. He equates forgiveness directly with virtue, sacrifice, truth, holiness, and quiet of mind. In fact, he goes as far as saying forgiveness is the Vedas, the ultimate sacred knowledge. It is stored spiritual merit, and it's the divine reality of Brahma itself. By being capable of forgiving everything, a person isn't just taking the high road, they're attaining the highest possible regions of blessedness, and actively protecting the ascetic merit of the entire future.
When we juxtapose these two paths side by side, the logical choice becomes incredibly clear. On one hand, the angry man is blind to true reality. He loses all his dignity and skill, and ultimately meets with destruction both in this world and the next. But contrast that with the forgiving man. The virtuous hold the opinion that the honest and forgiving person is ever victorious. They gain numerous everlasting regions and act as the literal preserver of species in society. It's a night and day difference. So how on earth do we apply this vast cosmic philosophy to a real high-stakes situation? Let's check out Section 4, Choosing True Strength, where we see how Yudhishthira applies all of this to his own immediate, highly stressful conflict.
Watch how beautifully Yudhishthira builds a logical progression away from war, actively choosing the sovereignty of self-possession over the total calamity of wrath. He's facing this massive crisis with his rival, Duryodhana. Step 1. He recognizes anger's faults. He clearly sees that his rival doesn't deserve the kingdom, precisely because he's unable to acquire forgiveness. Step 2. He listens to the wise and forgiving. And step 3, because Yudhishthira believes he truly deserves sovereignty, he concludes that forgiveness must take possession of him. He actively adopts gentleness and forgiveness because they represent eternal virtue.
He solidifies this tremendous resolve by observing the counsel he keeps: Grandsire Bhishma, Krishna, Preceptor Drona, Vidura, Kripa, Sanjaya, and Grandsire Vyasa. Yudhishthira notes that all the greatest, most learned, and spiritually advanced figures of their time consistently urge the path of peace and forgiveness. He realizes that aligning with true wisdom means aligning with peace, completely regardless of the temptation to just give in to wrath. I want to leave you with this incredibly powerful question straight from the text to carefully consider the next time you're tempted to mistake anger for power. If the injured always return their injuries, what remains of the world? Take a moment to really reflect on that. True strength isn't the volume of your wrath or the quickness of your retaliation. It's the quiet, universe-holding power of your forgiveness. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this ancient logic gives you a brand new framework for what true, enduring strength actually is.